So let's move on to our weekly feature, of course, where we take a look at stories dominating the headlines over the past 7 days. And for that, we are joined by UNISA Political Sciences Professor, Professor Derek Kutza, International Relations Analyst. He's also the Director and Senior Research Fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues at the Mr. Tembisa Fakude, and Communication Strategist and Social Commentator, Mr. Kondile Ketama, also joining us as we look back on the week that was. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I do actually want to start off with the story that we just looked at, this matter around the Patriotic Alliance president, and I think, Kondile, I will give this one to you to start with. The issue, of course, going all the way back to earlier on in the week when a podcast called Open Chats started to make headlines for what some say were slurs and derogatory comments about coloured people. Then the EFF pointing out, when you've got the Patriotic Alliance, for instance, saying, well, we're going to open criminal charges of hate speech against these podcasters. The EFF coming out and saying, well, if we go back to your own social media, Gayton McKenzie, all the way back in 2011, you made various racial slurs, talking about how he allegedly used the K word on social media. But I wonder what this says to you about where we are with race relations, if we're having the right conversation. It's not lost on me that it's just days before we get into the National Convention to the dialogue. Kondile.
Yeah, that's interesting, Naledi, because for me, this thing, it's two-sided. One, you have a currently having a discussion around the regulation of podcasts. But on the other side, we also have the minister making all these type of comments. Remember, we're coming from a very, very sensitive history as South Africa. And I would believe that the minister was supposed to know better on how to conduct himself on issues that relates to race and so. Yes, the issue of colored community, if I may say, is very sensitive in South Africa because we have seen some of the interactions that we have. And in fact, Naledi, it reminded me of the history of colored. You remember there was this lady who was groomed by the father by the name of Zwet Fati in the Western Cape, the first lady to own a property in the Camps Bay. Now, you can tell that coloreds in South Africa have a space and have a room. So you can't take it for granted that they are non-existing. And so they must be given their special role and their special the special part that they must play in South Africa. They are part of South Africa. And we know what the Constitution says in terms of race classification. Now, coming back to the minister was supposed to know better and comment even better. And there was, things like your podcast and what. He knew very well that the comments that he was making have serious racial undertones, and there will be views out there. So I feel that the minister was supposed to have done better from the communications point of view, but also we must not forget the history of South Africa when it comes to racism and what the current governing party or the party that is leading government at the moment stood for. It stood for non-racialism and so. And so those are the things that all of us should be knowing by now. And the minister was supposed to really be knowing better from where he's actually positioned at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, let's of course just remind people that after the Open Chats matter that saw McKenzie and certainly his party heading to open charges of hate speech against these podcasters. These are tweets that go all the way back to 2011, Prof. Kutz, and I wonder what you make of this. You've got, for instance, now the ATM saying that they've lodged a complaint against McKenzie to the Presidency and Parliamentary Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests. Is this the kind of response that we should be having from our politicians?
Well, I think this, first of all, good evening. I think this is an issue which is very complicated because it is now persons who are, for lack of a better word, who are not white and who are accused of some form of racism. And I think this is where this debate is becoming relatively different from those in the past, where it was predominantly white persons who were involved in incidents like this. I think what it does indicate is that the relations amongst the different groups in South Africa at the moment has become much more complicated than maybe in the past. And that specifically when it comes to colored persons, that has now starting to boil over. And that is why we see the polarization that is taking place politically speaking, especially between the ANC, the DA, and then all the proliferation of so-called colored parties that happened, especially in the Western Cape. And the Patriotic Alliance is part of that symptom that developed. And I think this is where Minister McKenzie comes from. But earlier years, he was very reckless in his pronouncements before he became involved, now more lately, in the more formal politics, when he was still very much on the margins, politically speaking. He made statements that I think is now catching up with him. So he will have to account for that with his position where he is now. But I fully agree that is some of the issues that are, well, it's possibly one of the main issues that should become the focus of a national dialogue. It's not about, in the first instance, service delivery matters, which appear to be almost now emerging as the issues. But it is these issues about national identity, about national cohesion, about the relationship between all of us, and how to deal with incidents like this. And also what has been said in the past. I mean, they can't now, what has been said is going to be damaging to some people. But how do we deal with that in future?
Yeah, and such an important discussion because it is emotive for so many of us. In fact, Mr. Fakude, I want to bring you in because as we get closer to the National Convention, which is supposed to be the planning platform for the national dialogue, you've got now the Steve Biko Foundation, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation, the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, as well as the F.W. de Klerk Foundation, withdrawing from this dialogue that has been seen by so many as such an important process for South Africa to go through to really start to build that unity that we've been wanting to build for 31 years. I mean, what you make around those developments, some of the issues that they raise are that, there's a lack of finances, lack of a proper platform and, some issues around the time frames that are involved. What do you make of that situation, Mr. Fakude?
Well, I'm not sure whether it's been seen by so many as a significant process. I think there are very many people in South Africa have actually questioned the significance of this. Many people have said and continue to say it's a waste of money. And unfortunately, I'm one of those who don't really believe that we need to engage in such a process to achieve what that we couldn't achieve for the past 30 years. There are a lot of urgent socio-political issues that need addressing, and we know what those are, to be engaging in a discussion, a national dialogue, which, by the way, is not going to cover anyone, because it's just too impossible to achieve the objectives that are set. If you were to give all those that will be participating in this a chance to speak, it will take us 10 years to actually address concerns of South Africans, which are many. I'm of the view that the reason why you have these legacy foundations withdrawing is because, yes, the initiators of this had good intentions, but if they were prudent, they would have left the process to independent stakeholders within this process. But instead, they insisted on going ahead, controlling, managing, and planning, and including dictating the agenda of this process. And I think that's what many of these legacy foundations who felt that they were just used to rubber stamp a process. Besides the other logistical nightmares and controversies surrounding this process. But I think the major issue here is that you invited these three independent stakeholders in the form of these legacy foundations to be part of this process, but you expect them to just endorse the process and not lead the process. I think the wise and the most prudent thing that the government should have done, at least the government led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, should have relinquished the control and the driving of this process to independent stakeholders within this process and let them drive it. And I think the reports or the outcome of this would have been much more legitimate, instead of having the same government that's been accused of where there's a lack of cohesion, lack of good governance and corruption driving the process, and at the same time it looks as if they're the ones who are going to give us the report back on what did they get at from the South Africans, which I think it's problematic, and that's probably the main reason why you have these legacy foundations deciding to pull out.
Yeah, Kondile, what do you make of this? The legacy foundation's pulling out, but you've got the presidency saying all costs associated with this dialogue are being handled in line with the PFMA.
Yeah, let's first correct this notion that legacy foundations are the only key stakeholders there. No, there are a number of stakeholders there. What is supposed to happen is the government that has been elected by the people has to, from time to time, engage with communities. And for me, the dialogue is but part of a mechanism that you would use to engage with communities. So if you want to rely, look, government will never be able to satisfy everybody, unfortunately. But if there is a view of a dialogue that didn't come through government, and government is prepared to fund or to foot the bill, why can't we as citizens participate? Because we want to express our views as ordinary people. We want to interact with these leaders. We want to engage them. We want to talk about the future of this country. The economy of this country is not doing well. There are issues of racism that are beginning to rear their heads. There are issues of unemployment. So we can't disengage. We have to engage, Naledi. We have to make sure that every stakeholder that is key comes into party. I've tried to follow the issue of legacy foundations. I'm told that they only disengaged on Thursday, on the Thursday meeting, and the only thing that they were worried about, it was the date, that the date is too close. So I think before we can even engage, we need to find facts first as to why did these critical stakeholders disengage, why this time. And I can tell now that there are a number of stakeholders that we need to find out as to who are the role players there who will be representing us into that dialogue. But I am saying the government that is elected by the people has to engage. As to how, that's something else. And for me, the dialogue is but one mechanism that we need to use to access this government and engage it.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. And I think that when we come back, we're going to look at other things, other issues that have come up in the week that was, because it was quite a busy week in the rundowns. One of the big ones, of course, was the kicking in of those tariffs, those US tariffs, 30%. And of course, we did hear this week that the president of South Africa saying that still very much an opportunity for President Ramaphosa to engage President Donald Trump. But what does that need to look like in the days, weeks, months that are to come? We'll get some views from our panel. We look at other issues as well. Of course, the issue of the IDT, the CEO, seen in a video allegedly attempting to bribe a journalist. Also, big talking point in the week that was. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. So we continue to look at the stories that stood out for you over the past 7 days. What stories dominated the headlines for you? We continue with our panel, UNISA Political Sciences Professor, Professor Dr. Kotze, International Relations Analyst, who is also Director and Senior Research Fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues, Mr. Thembisa Fakudi, as well as Communication Strategist and Social Commentator Kondile Ketama, joining us via video link. But let's take a look at some of the WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers as well. The number 072-110-5584. But let's take a look at those. Sanoge sends one that says African states are playing a dangerous game. These Americans are busy dragging them in a pool of hot mud. I'm struggling to understand, how do they accept rejected criminals in their country to be in their country? Okay, why is that Trump not keeping them in his country? He accepted whites from South Africa, but deport all those who are not white from their countries. Okay, I'm sure that Sanoge, they're talking about the criminals that have been brought into Eswatini. Reno says, good evening. Let's support Steve Biko Foundation by marching to UNISA on Friday to halt this unnecessary dialogue. Reno. Okay, interesting. Thank you so much for that. Busani Mngube says, straight to the point. Gayton must go. Busani, thank you so much for sending in your message. And Nelson Malefashe says, the dialogue is a strategy of ANC just to convince people to vote for them. And Nelson, we appreciate your views as well. Thank you so much. Okay, well, let's continue with our panel and look at some of the other big stories of the day. Prof. Kotze, I don't know if you want to respond to the comments that were made by Nelson there, one of our viewers who says that this dialogue is a platform for the ANC, if you want to add a comment to that. But the Congress for or let's say COPE rather, also seemingly making the news. They've set up their interim leadership structure, getting ready for 2026. Mosiuoa Lekota stepping back. If you think that they've been able to reinvigorate fresh blood in there, and perhaps at the same time, if you will, I'm going to stack some questions on you. Maibuye and Floyd Shivambu also tackling the 2026 local government elections. Prof. Kotze, the prospects for COPE and Maibuye?
Yeah, I think if one looks at them, the prospects are very low. It's very slim that they are going to make any impact on it. I think in the case of COPE, they've reached the point right at the bottom. I think they have only 1 or 2 representatives at the moment in Parliament. It has been to a large extent a product of Mosiuoa Lekota. The fact that he is now retiring is effectively bringing the party to its natural end. I don't think there's any prospect for them to go any further. Maibuye is, I would say, also in a very similar situation. First of all, I think the fact that Floyd Shivambu is hopping from the one party to the other now is negative from a public point of view. It does not create a sense of trust in him. At the same time, I think he is going to campaign in a very crowded environment. There's already part of the ANC is there on the left, the MK is there, the EFF is there, ATM, who wants to merge with the MK party is there. So what is left really for Maibuye party? I don't think there's very much. The Communist Party is also going to be participating in next year's election. They haven't done very well in this last by-election that they have participated in Polokwane. So it's all indications that there's not really much space for new parties, and especially more towards the left or left of the center. So I don't see good prospects for them.
Yeah, Kondile, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond to that. Maibuye, COPE 2026, could they see some growth in your view?
I don't think so. I think Floyd, as the prof is putting it, Floyd, but voters have got a way of looking at these political parties. And I'm waiting for any research outcome at the moment, just to check as to how are we doing with these parties that are cropping up towards the elections. And Floyd wants to put himself into those cycles where you have new parties cropping, and most of them didn't make it. And I don't know how does Floyd look at it. As for COPE, for me, COPE had one phase, which is the Terra Lekota. And then after the Terra, I know that people like you, Dennis Bloom and so, were trying to make an impact. But we've seen the numbers going down each and every time it's elections. And I'm sure they're left, as Prof is saying, I'm sure they're left with one seat in the parliament. And with the Lekota bowing out, I can't see them really making it. And also the voter setup in South Africa seem to be changing, and there are new on the blocks that are coming in. They take from these big parties all the time. And when these new ones come, I'm sure if for example, if Floyd has to make it, he'll be the only one in Parliament moving forward. I don't know with the local government elections. I don't think they will make an impact on local government elections. Maybe nationally there could be something because he has got that appeal in other provinces by virtue of being prominent in the media and so. But people who are voting, I can tell you now, Naledi, you can't be misled by what the social media is saying or the media is saying. When you go to ordinary people, It's total different story altogether.
Okay. Mr. Fakuda, I know that you comment a lot on international relations, but you're more than welcome to step in on that issue as well. You know, if you throw the political bones for Cope and Maibuya, what you see in 2026. But I do also want to move on and speak to really what your focus, for the most part, really is. The president this week having a brief meeting with the U.S. President Donald Trump. This is as we see those tariffs starting to kick in. But the statement, of course, saying that the two leaders undertook to continue with further engagements, recognizing the various trade negotiations the U.S. is currently involved in. Is there still some hope that we could turn things around?
Yeah, I think so. But on the previous question you posed to my two colleagues, you know, I'm for multi-party democracy. I'm for multi-party participation. And I think it's a good thing in South Africa that we have this confidence from young people forming their own political parties. Whether they'll win or not is another story. That's up to the constituencies. But it's a positive thing in terms of our developing and maturing democracy. The only challenge, of course, with that is that you tend to have this fragmentation and the impact on the skill set. So if you're going to have all of these capable individuals, instead of working together, forming their own political parties, you then diversify or you pollute, you kind of dilute the skill set that could have been used better if there were few parties. So that's one. Regarding the U.S. South Africa negotiations or talks, South Africa has taken a very clear and an interesting position. That is, they'll continue engaging with the United States, and notwithstanding, of course, some of the miscommunication on the part of the government regarding the tariffs. There was something about reciprocal tariffs, which is not the case. South Africa is not going to be reciprocating any tariffs. We are not going to be punishing the United States. Instead, we're going to continue engaging them and go on in the charm offensive, as Minister Parkstow has been doing, including our own President Ramaphosa and, to an extent, the Department of International Relations Corporation doing the same. So I think we might just yield the results, even though, of course, the tariffs have kicked in, but we might just yield results. But importantly, of course, this has given us a chance and an opportunity to start searching for alternative markets. And we do have a chance now to diverse and redirect our exports to the countries that will really want to deal with us. The only challenge will be the automobile sector, but we also heard from the Department of Trade, International Trade and Cooperation and Competition, that we can actually have a chance to send some of our automobile, particularly the BMWs and the Fords, back to source, and the source can resell them to different markets. So although there are challenges, but I think the South African government is taking a much more proactive position in terms of trying to, allay the fears which have been growing within the domestic and international market, that they are doing something to ensure that the trade and business between ourselves and the United States continues, but importantly, to allay fears from potential investors who are intending pumping the direct foreign investment into this country, that the government of South Africa is actually quite proactive and is looking at making sure that the impact of the tariffs that were imposed by the United States is minimal.
Yeah, and we are going to move towards closing it off now, so I just want to get some final thoughts. Professor Kotze, what do you make, number one, of the IDT issue? I mean, for once, for instance, you saw the Minister of Public Works actually heading to the police station to file criminal charges against the IDT CEO, a video that got South Africans talking, where the Daily Maverick was able to capture the IDT CEO allegedly attempting to give a 60,000 Rand bribe to a journalist to stop investigating matters of her house and corruption inside the IDT. What a moment, and certainly what a video to watch, right?
Yes, that is indeed so. I think what is very worrying about this is that the IDT is a very critical state-owned enterprise that deals with the establishment of infrastructure, social infrastructure, like schools, like hospitals, like building of courts. and all sorts of similar institutions. In this particular case, what started it is about the oxygen tanks for hospitals and the alleged corruption involved in that. I think what we have seen now subsequently is just compromising the CEO completely. I don't think there's any way, despite the fact that the family foundation is now saying she has been set up by Peter Louis Meiberg, the journalist. I think it's so glaringly clear of what has happened here that there's no way, there's no defense for this. And it is unfortunately another example of where state-owned enterprises have been compromised in a very critical environment, and that is, as I say, infrastructure, which is for the government in general one of their key priorities in order to build a foundation for the economy or for a growing economy. So it is, I would say it's unforgivable. There's no way in which there's a defense against this.
Yeah. Gondile, final thoughts on that issue?
Yeah, no, look, Naledi, it has put journalism and communications on the spot. For example, how do you, as a communicator, go and talk to a journalist when a journalist has got cameras, he has set up cameras all over the place? What type of a journalism is that? How does the communicator arrange that type of a meeting, with her boss and so on? For me here, both communications and journalism have been put on the spot because I do not understand. I do not get it as to if I'm saying, hey, let's meet quickly, Naledi, let's discuss this matter and so. And then the next thing, you have planted cameras all over the place. And then, now for me, I think this is the test for both communications and journalism. And I'm sure within the circles of both trades, there must be a discussion to see how do we deal with this. It was wrong for the spokesperson to go that route. It was equally, in my view, wrong for a journalist to set up cameras all over the place. So I'm saying there's got to be a cordial relationship between the two people, both a communicator and a journalist. Now, all of a sudden, we are going to be fearful of talking to journalists. Journalists are going to be suspected of being doing this. So you see, it's a very dicey situation that has to be dealt with. I know that SANEF has tried to pronounce itself, but I think it will be a discussion that is going on moving forward. Okay,
Mr. Fakude, I see you responding. Please step in. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, some of us have been journalists for a very long time, and this happens everywhere in the world, There's hidden cameras by journalists who are trying to trap those who are corrupt. It happens everywhere in the world. It's not a uniquely South African position. To say that this places some kind of spot or limelight on journalism, I think it's completely misplaced. This is good journalism. It's called investigative journalism. And in the days and times of social media and the use of cell phone cameras, it was very appropriate to use those gadgets to catch these corrupt officials. And the challenge, of course, is that we've got not fit for purpose communicators in this country, people who do not necessarily understand what communication is all about. But if you really have worked within journalism, and this is a very important part of our business, that's why it's called the fourth estate, and it has evolved in terms of technology, and its technology now involves, by and large, cameras. Before, it would have been difficult to bring cameras to catch those who are corrupt and who seek to solicit bribes from journalists. So I think the winner in this whole story and the whole week has been journalism, good journalism, investigative journalism that has found good use of technology, good use of social media, and good use of our phones that we carry all the time. And I don't think he brought in big cameras and professional cameras that were going to be invasive, but he brought in what the whole world is currently using. If you look from Panama Papers to trapping of Trump when Trump was speaking and demeaning women during his campaign, etc. So this is not something new. This is something that's used all the time around the world, and it's become accepted. And it's one of the things that I think was smartly used this time around to expose this corruption that we're all complaining about. And I don't think it brings any bad sport to journalism. Instead, as far as I'm concerned, it promotes and highlights good, deep, and maturing journalism that's supposed to be exported in terms of skill to other countries. And South Africa is ranked, by the way, amongst one of the best countries in terms of practices and journalism skills.
Yeah, gentlemen, I can see that this one is going to be a debate, but it certainly is a good talking point even for South Africans on various platforms. And I think that as we close off on this issue of Tebogo Malaka, the suspended CEO of the IDT, and that video by the Daily Maverick, the question does remain, would we have known about an alleged attempt to bribe a journalist had we not been able to see it for ourselves? But you can continue to share your thoughts with us on WhatsApp 0721105584. I'm going to leave it there though with our panelists. Gentlemen, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Thembisa Fakude, Director and Senior Research Fellow at the Africa-Asia Dialogues. Mr. Kondile Ketama, Social Commentator and Communication Strategist as well. And Professor Dirk Kotze, Political Sciences Professor at UNISA. We take a short break. We've got your headlines at the top of the hour. Stay with us.